Kapsuchi, Naye Jinye Gipe Sonagi, Rola Penche Sangye Rupasho, Sangye Chedan Sangye Shonamla, Janche Badu Dani Kapsuchi, Naye Jinye Gipe Sonagi, Rola Penche Sangye Rupasho. Saji Peki Jakshe Meto Tramre Rablingji
It's such a beautiful day outside, and inside full of smile and full of people with a smiling at me. So the environment influence is really good. Today is a very auspicious day for Buddhist people. We believe that today is the day Lord Buddha went to the heaven to repay kindness of his mother, who took rebirth, was reborn in heaven, and he visit heaven, and then there are ways that he repaid his mother's kindness. That we will be talking about a little bit about this. And as for the people in this war at that time, the kings and the people, so what I mean, Misir, or the Misir, the general people, the population, waiting for a Buddha to come from heaven, because they miss Buddha very much, especially his teachings. And then today is the day they feel very excited and feel everybody now Buddha is coming. So they have this great joy in them. So this is general kind of short what do you call it? Explanation of this special occasion. Now I have said heaven. I have said something about his mother reborn in heaven. I need to we talk about past and future lives here. Now it's getting a little bit complicated. The story itself is very beautiful. Normally in the West we have Mother's Day, Father's Day. In a Tibetan calendar, we don't have a Mother's Day like in the West they have. But actually, if we have Mother's Day, but we don't celebrate it as like a Mother's Day. But if we think about very carefully about this story that I just told you, then this is truly a Mother's Day in a Tibetan calendar. So Buddha himself is showing us that we have to repay the kindness of our mother. So the story itself is not important. Buddhist people, they can take it seriously, and the others, you don't need to take it seriously. That's being open-minded. Now, as we say, moral of the story is person being grateful for is something that people thinking to repay somebody's kindness, especially your family, mother. So, in this beautiful hall of the Tushita, we all are born,
Yeah, we were born from
our mother, human mother. So, how can we repay the kindness of our loved ones, and especially whom you feel so grateful to? that's the biggest question. In samsara sila na dewa mido jigding ki tunju chög tuwan kejim na piche jigding ki nguene jigding ki chawe nguene ani pami gajin sagati.
So not speaking in a kind of religious Buddhist sense, but
hold on, this is not on. Is it on?
Yeah.
Is it coming?
Yeah, try it. Maybe it's not on.
Is it on?
It's on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Want to be correct? Okay, great.
so not taking this in a kind of religious sense or a Buddhist sense, but just in a kind of worldly or normal worldly sense of how we have gratitude towards our parents and those who have been kind to us.
Thank you. Your English is much better than mine. So you have to do your job now. Jigding toone pame kodin sadu aranjogi tojiranjo samalo tingdegi shenyu ani lhabab mangche da jiranjo samalo kusore pame yabu yebe kodin teni jiranjo da tingdegi long sedan sendenji jetoji and 롱고이네 롱고 딱지 통계 정보 유서지들이야 통계 정보 유서지들이야 망제도 상황 정보를 봤어. 근데 이 지난해 밤에 그린 섭세에 디지털을 남도 나신거를 긴기 요하레스 도스님 찍었잖아.
So talking from this kind of more worldly, less religious, more worldly perspective, we all understand this form of gratitude. We were basically all brought up in environments where we received good kind of modern education, and where all of the kind of external, in general, all of the external facilities were sort of, were sort of available to us. And so we have a kind of gratitude towards these things, and this is something that appears easily to our minds and which we understand very clearly.
남셰 윤도 남주기다 밤에 칼 님보를 비체 밤에 그 로종 체하다 저버야고 체고 스토리잖니 디 지기 야고지 년지 아니 뭐 냥해서 그러베 랑렌도 때문에 뭐 야고 유세 밤에 뭐 몸도지 저기요.
So our parents encourage us to be to have good character and good behavior, and to study hard to carry out our education in a positive way. And so this is following the kind of advice like this is also a kind of way of practicing So this sort of this is a way of sort of fitting in with the way our parents want us to develop in a positive way.
Then 지기 로종 주야고 시체 아니 내가 좀 마음 바래요. 준비가면야 다 밤에 거진 세트 저저들이 다 정말 로종 주야고 돼. 아니 내가 주야고 좀 디위가면야 다 지딩이 상관한 거야. 아니 지기 밤을 되게 레와지 연애 매네를 밤만 나차 아니 간인지 준비가라 아니 밤에기 샤도 없이부터 시스템은 시스템은 밤에 자 그렇지 밤에기 다 트레인사들이 Tulen Savia Jig Samba Corbin, Dian Tulen Satan Chicabas, Tulen Satan.
So they've given us this advice to, to study hard and and when we finish studying to get some good employment, this kind of thing. And so, if we follow this kind, so in the worldly kind of way of thinking again, if we follow this kind of advice, then this is a way. This is another in terms of how do we repay the kindness, whether at the times when our So then, so for instance, following their advice, so that we study hard, we are very sincere when we have employment and work very well and get ourselves a good job or whatever. This is following their advice in that sense. And also then at the times when our parents suffer difficulties, such as when their health is failing, then if we're able to also directly kind of benefit them at that time, these are ways in which we would, in a worldly way, we would talk about how these are like the way that we would repay the kindness of our parents.
다랑 레스기 메스 니 섬주디 크리인스라나 베나 답베나 파메 커딩 카시 섬당만 찍디 크리용으로스나 소주 로정다 젠당 아니 라가투 야고차 벤조이 야고차지 아니 소주 미장 니버지 답바 미장 니버스고바 답 소주랑 친지 스메 까리야 아니 수수기 파마리아 뜻에 다 무엇이만 대학 선배님제 파마세도 정신이 sem나로 지불돼야지 마도지 다디 차라나지 딩이야나서 지제르디 두에 도데 이나양의 지제리야다 지기 리퀘어를 쓰는 게 다베 요만데 그런 그거 좀 전부요 이나양或者 지기 sem나로 예 파마세도 정신이 이제 생각이 돼야지 근데 이 집에서 가서 남사와 수수 교회에 개명이 이제 들으지 레벨가 되냐 수수 파마스도 그 뒤에 수수비 그 산다다 부국이 초성으로 돼 파마스도 되게 거든 진짜 아니 지금 초과를 보고 유명해 내년 벌써 싫어 네 단대 지금 파마리아 샤도 마주비 가르르샤 거딘 섬시 마체 가르르샤스 아니 상당히 고급지 준지 디치용도 랑신기 아니 파마리아 지금 거딘 섬비요데 거딘 섬마도야 되라다 게임 마소나 게임 니스 상당히 디두스
Rinpoche says that how to so for instance if we study hard, we get good employment, for instance, our kind of wealth is increased and we have good education. So Rinpoche says that he's not criticizing the way things happen in the West, but he says that often many people think to live quite close to their parents as a way of sort of being close to them. But of course, in the West, this situation doesn't always happen. So Rinpoche is not sort of criticizing that, but he's saying that even if you don't live very close to where your parents are, and for instance, if you have a separate household where you marry or become you have a relationship with a spouse and that takes you away from the place where your parents are living, that we should still have this, so you have a new family, for instance, and you have to take care of children, etc. Even though we could be distant, in physically distant, but we should still have that sense of feeling, a sense of kind of feeling close to our parents, and even at those times when we're not able to kind of manifestly help them directly, we should retain that sense of closeness and gratitude towards them, and then whenever we are able to, the opportunities arise for us to help them, we should immediately take those opportunities. And Rinpoche said that there are two things which are obstacles towards this kind of repaying of the kindness.
The Tangbuddhi, you sing Gloria, Jigi Pame and Gloria, Oma Cheran Cheras, Macheran Cheras, Majo Grounds and Yeri, that Maju Indicamasona, it's their responsibility to take care of. Some of them, they don't want to do. This some of the bed digging to see your matters. Did the dig ready? Ina, these some of the Majumasone Pesha could you done? Ya, I got you done to do a competition. The man said, Pesha the Secretary, get a could you this soon, my dear. Motivation, then just some of the Ranshinki, some of the Narolia, obstacle.
So the first obstacle would be that we have this, sometimes it comes to our mind that it's kind of, they're my parents, they're supposed to do this, it's their responsibility to do this, and this kind of, this kind of thinking. So this is not, I wouldn't say that this is completely wrong, but then there are two ways of kind of taking that way of thinking. What are we using, or what is the motive behind our way of thinking like that? Are we taking it in a positive way, or are we taking it in a negative way where it makes us feel unhappy when that kind of when that kind of thought comes to our mind?
The Canada, Lonese, Location, and the Uganda, Washington, Chigi, Otosi, Labuto, around the Piggy, Talon Chumba, Piggy, Piggy, did you do Pamela, which is Machera Cheris, Otosi, that's a matter of some Navaria. Do we show some Chiguri, Yara show some Chiguri? Any do we show a young, continue, you request time. Yara show a young report which is time. Tanazuma on Jigoja, Karin Jerry, send giving photo, and Milia to be Panto, Ya Karin Mutu did that. Yes. In the seminar, meeting potential tingly. In Jambi, Nayan, the Tambadi, water dog over the Yana, Jig Yantaway, Putawa, Yamaji, Tambadi, water dog, did not sort of touch it.
So Rinpoche, I stayed in Rinpoche stayed in Canada for 2 years to study, and he had a friend who was a Canadian friend who was born in Canada, and who told him, who said this kind of thing to him, that this idea that well, it's my parents, it's their job, it's their responsibility to do that kind of thing. And again, we can come up with a variety of reasons to take this in the positive way, or to take it in the negative way. And actually, but since we, people want happiness, and we should, it's beneficial to think in a positive way, then we should there's a choice here, and we should choose, if we do have that kind of thinking, we should choose to take it in a more positive understanding.
제가 디 계제의 코리인상 아니면 카시지 디 토어 삼당인스 리서치 마서 제제 그 계제들 덴바니직도 다이나요 계제들이야 렌지잖아 다 가르쳐 잡고 그랬어 이 삼당인스 아마라다 삼로나로야 그 그래서 그래 파마 가보시에비는 아주 파마전이 제가비야 파매기 당하러 차샤는 또 세원으로 주시스 예민은 세원으로 주시고 또 세원으로 주시는 고도 시제 파마니기 마셔로 말이스 이나야 저것들이 매일 다 아주 마서네 예 나로야 보지 차별 랑신기 민디 수차기 유명하다 수임에다 몽발라 간제스 차기 유명 큰 하모고 베토아네 파마니기 많이 얘기를 시제 소소를 타고기 제거지 다 지리는 바이오로지가 직세도 안한주의는 다 그랑신 텐제비 위에 다 막이 찬지스 서로 밤에 찬지세 디 초된 중국에 왔어.
When I heard this from my Canadian friend, I went home and I thought about it for a few days, and I thought, is this statement, is this kind of way of thinking true or untrue, and also how would I reply to this way of thinking, and so. From my way of thinking, the truth of the situation is that, for instance, after I was born, I was recognized as Serkong Rinpoche and given the name Serkong Rinpoche. But at the time that I was born to my parents, they had no idea that would be the case when I grew up, and they had no thought of helping me because I was Serkong Rinpoche and not a kind of born as someone with no special name. They immediately had the thought, this is my child, and in kind of scientific way of talking about it, we would say that this is a kind and they immediately showed me care and loving kindness. And in a scientific way of understanding this, we would say that that's a kind of, the scientists would say this is a kind of biological fact. But and perhaps in the Buddhist way, we say this is a kind of almost innate quality. The quality of loving kindness is almost an innate quality that's felt towards one's offspring.
아주 가서래 니주만 보지 중국가야 다 파마님도 다 춘주가로 망체리야 간이디가 봐 파마님도 데려가 다 여보야 체로 저기 아니 다지기 니주디 체로 거지 아니 다 교단은 다다를 생겨서 그보다 이랑 가서래 나를 여보시다 지금 만나는 그 인생에서 람상하고마다 대치 patience 와 세모멘토 람상하고 용대지 다 unrespectful debate 요르바다디 어디에 용대지 두스 다 디양나도 성당고 그래서 다 디도 아주 마소네 파마스류 성직단은 소소 파마스요 초진 성당은 소소 구구조 중앙 소소리야 다당지토 계절과 또 초니 성을 같은나라 또 파마지구스 소소 빨아하면 지구성 마당이나요 중앙 소소바 차별가리야 부구모 소소리야 통당다 다당다 지금 워바 개인들 점에 다 저러면 좀 센나로 다 때네 다 지금 마음을 다 파멸하가 그러니지나 뭐 아마 나가 그러니지나 인식 셈나로야 터득이 맞아 보고 있어요. 터득 하고요. 그렇진 다디 디카니디 먼저 소셜 애니멀스가 어딘가에 디카니 친구들이 있다. 말 라메밍 손으로 지디고 요들 아니 망제지다 저번에 제가 하면 용다 산다 용다 다들 상황 알이야 계제 TV와는 제가 당한 디디리 가서 그래 대 Tushita 제가 쇼 송을 때 제가 디 패밀리 issues solve 제가 한 거여서 차샤 지라다
contribution the killer data because patients part of the already because of poverty chibu but is it touching baby
알레오 베나 단대니 계시야디 아주 파마티고리 야고치하고를 세지 거더 고요 때 있나요? 삼루직 땅에나 뭐 벌 수수 파마치를 가면 수수 부기 따따라지 단단히 되게 특별히 봤어. 어디 종이 상당해. 시행을 상당히 지 라고 상당히 지 뜻도와
there are two reasons for two kinds of obstacles to developing the gratitude towards our parents, and a second sort of reason or obstacle is, for instance, when we're with our parents and we're very young, there seem to be, there's generally perhaps not so many large problems with our parents. I mean, but as we start to get older, maybe we come more into conflict with our parents, and our feelings of disrespect towards our parents may develop, and this perhaps is a kind of result of not having a good practice of patience within ourselves. So that 총리스 그 탐보디기
조조랑 상담도 장기 다 시행 상담도 당 가만히 상담과 이 시행 가만히 상담제 다 초직 상담한데 수수부 중앙에서 가만차리라가 부부 수수 상담도 디 상담 수수 트레이닝디하고 가만히 들어요나 디 트레이닝디 중앙 부부 수수리야 다디 저리 두고 봤어.
아니 positive side. So we could think about this in two different ways. One from thinking about the side of the other, which would be our parents, and thinking, and the other way would be to think about when these complications arise. The other way would be to think about how, for instance, when we were to grow up and perhaps to have children ourselves, then it would almost be like a kind of, we would be thinking from the side of us being parents in the future, that is a kind of preparation, so maybe some understanding could come from the sense that this is a kind of preparation for us to understand how it would be like for us to be parents in the future. And Rinpoche also says that I have the name of being a high lama, and people come to confide in me with their problems, and often it's a kind of they often when they come to talk about me, they often talk to me a lot about family situations and ask for advice about family situations. So I've come here to Tushita today, and also to perhaps talk about some of these things in public with everybody.
But I'm not saying I'm the expert on this topic. Duchen, da Tsering topic jodi Tsering satang toani du da jiding toani tadang ju jigi pame gadi samji chinya jodi susu bi nubai yongsu so tuan je ni pamagi taji kanyi se tabshe ani jigi dus chigis ta niba chujo to ne shebina ani ta kasure diam ta tebo chimbu to ne ani chujo to ne shebu jona ani maraju ta pamagi 시디 달린 세디 지고만 봐. 제 거 통하면은 아니 지금 밤에 제만 아니 지금 하나만 뉴스 더디日本 상담이나 아주 겨우만 집토는 누구요 봐. 더 겨우만 집토는 누구도 잡에 겨우만 치마세디 컨디션 샤고 때나 말한주 수봉디 토는 상담이나 수봉디 세대가랑 샤한데 이내 남시 윤지 딱 그거 내로스 다고 태소는 나가샤 더디 아니 남시디 말이 중국에 가르쳤어. 시비는 윤이 말라라고 가르쳤어. 시비 윤이 디네 나만의 내 영어셔서 해야 될 말한 주기日本들이야 아니 시기 바자유네 메카시리아 아니 지기 파마지기 부위비네야 시가담으로 나서 문제는 바이올로지컬 이 토한 진짜비는 분위기가 제당도 정말 저걸 연구해야 돼야 뭐 파마지 부분한테 학과도 아니 체만 부분 체만 있는데 들이야 다지시를 시간을 와야 돼. 집 대해서 상보여야 돼. 집이 지금 좁아야 돼. 대대지기 먼저 통일하고 있어. 대인 요즘에 다도 시제를 세지만 보시니 또 남부산이 차네. 남시 군대를 상무당도 어디다 통매타대 시작하고 되고 또 다음에 다들 시작하시 디리서치만 어디 그래서 대유 아니 디기 리서치 디기 토네 아니 다 배신 남시 군대를 통마디 시작해야 되나 아니 다가란 게 얘기 생전 몸에가 장면을 저기 하면 제요 영어만 시에 도움도 심지어 다들 뒤에 여기 다가란 게얘 아마 가져시를 빠와 가져시를 가지고 다 제대로 저기 말했어. 얘는 나고 상인이 다 대바치기 주신이 시도 다 심지어 탐지 마치 영년지 임버리나 아니 당연히 전에 파마스인데 그런 식으로 주지 세대의 통도 겨우 통하면요. 뒤쪽만 그런 식으로 주지 상식지 레디 버스.
So what we've talked about so far is to take things from repaying the kindness from the kind of worldly perspective, from the worldly perspective, and from this perspective, as much as we're able to, we feel we should try to relieve the sufferings, the general sufferings and difficulties of our parents. But then if we change our perspective and talk about it from the kind of religious or Buddhist perspective, and in particular from the perspective of the Mahayana, or the greater vehicle of the Buddhist system, then we would say that there is not one sentient being who is not performed at some point not acted as our parents in the. There's not one sentient being who has not acted as our parents. So this brings in the kind of understanding of past and future lives and the kind of continuum of consciousness. So how do we posit this? How do we posit past and future lives? For instance, in this body and this life, how does these are questions. Does the consciousness, at the end of this life, does the consciousness continue or not? Is there a continuum of consciousness or not? And we have to try and explain how past and future lives might be possible. So one angle to think about this is to think about what are called karmic imprints. So, for instance, it's seen very clearly that parents could have several children, and those children could receive this, could grow up in the same kind of environment and sort of in the same kind of environment and conditions, and yet children often display vastly different kind of characters, which is very difficult to explain on a kind of biological level because they came from the same biological parents and they grew up in a similar environment. But you may find that some are naturally very kind and loving, and some have a more negative character, and almost instinctively. So we need to do some research on this topic to come to a conclusion as to whether it's possible for past and future lives to exist. And so we have to think about whether. So this topic relies on the idea of whether there is a continuum of our consciousness. Is there a beginning, or is there an end to the continuum of our consciousness? So this we also have to investigate. If we decide that there's no beginning to our consciousness, then if we accept that, then there would be no way that then we would have to accept that all sentient beings at some, if we accept that continuum of consciousness to be beginningless, then we would have to accept that there have never been any sentient beings who have not been our mothers or our fathers, who have not been our parents. And so all beings would have performed at many different times, would have acted as our parents, and every single person that we see in front of us would also have done that. And so we would have this sense that, and then of course that they have treated us with great kindness. So we would have this feeling that that we are kind of that all sentient beings have been kind to us at some point in that time.
제자가 디 셈 세야디 리치 냥 컨디치샤 또 최고문이지 이나 야바르도 센스니티 거래dom지르샤 디 인짐지상당 부스.
So, I mean, the next question that comes immediately to mind is, what if you're a person of religious inclination, is to think, well, what is the mind like? What is the mind? What is the mind like?
But 지가 소리 체리비 디시제비가야 레벨 레벨이 작아지듯 더 수요 레벨이 이네 레벨을 로스키베 아니 셰바시에도 요마레스.
So for scientists, they would describe the mind merely as a function of the brain, and to talk about consciousness separate from the function of the brain, they would not talk about this. Posit this.
그래서 더 디퍼야 더 리서치 공부 쉬우지 더 겨울 붙이기 리서치 공부 쉬우지 나요를 제르번인도 제르버 조이네 어떤 것상 지금 회진 매로세 더 시버 레벨을 로즈지 회진 매로세 더 장대와나 하는 랩선도 지레샤스 말한테 고정스.
So a lot of research has been carried out on this topic, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama has, over many years now, been meeting with scientists to discuss these kind of topics. And it seems still at the moment that a lot of the scientists are still saying that they find it hard to accept a consciousness which is posited as separate from the brain or the brain function.
딱 그나 리서치를 가봐야 아주 레벨을 같은 거 같아도 미치사를 라고 요할 때 얘는 아주 지기 양념을 같이 공부 조사 주고라 도동 주선 딱 clear like 세트와 뭐 도시제야 clear like야 도스다 또 얘가 레벨 고주 맵지 이 나야 생기 너버디 많이 먹여자 지금 수분 플라토 소고도 리버도 timmak하고 소고 맵지지 왜 하고도 수분이 쉔 소다도 소고다 쉔셔되어지지 고 어디기 다른 쳐버지지 다 생기지 뭐 통데 중요해서
So recently, in recent years, in recent years, the scientists have come into contact with with Buddhists, and there have been some cases where meditative practitioners are after the function of the brain has ceased, they what we call tukdan. They remain in a kind of at the moment of after death, or after what we would call the clinical death, where the brain function has ceased. They remain in a kind of clear light or meditation. At this time, from the Buddhist perspective, the kind of the mental function related with the body has not completely ceased, and the body doesn't decompose, or it doesn't smell or decompose, and in some cases the body is actually said to become almost fresher after the time when the brain function, the signs of brain function have ceased. So scientists have come into contact with these events.
다 깨라친거 무시도 나음소리야 근데 나음소네 단다디 그 소리 깨발렌스야디 아니 그 갈때 아니 지가 소리 파마니가 비 아니 지기 다 구자서가 구자 두벌 땡치 아니 부지유이나 그저 누가 점기 보기 잡아요. 지금 그래서 뒤에는 잡아요 말이 야 파마기 그다음에 교육을 드리고 아니 경우로 지금 저기 모든 가능성은 가지 이거 교육 해야지. 이나 군인이 두송나 아니 제 잡아요 그랬으나 뒤에 잡아요 말했어. 뒤 가르치는 데서 지금 근데 나비가라 건조다 third condition so that in jig to the sample yours that is okay or maris just I take your jig so now sure that in some not shit
in encountering these kind of situations, I have been present in some in several meetings where the scientists have met with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and discussed some of these topics. And there's one of the questions that His Holiness asked the scientists is, if you have two parents, the same parents, does the sort of development of a fetus and the birth of a child rely only on the sperm and the egg from the parents? Is it always that if the sperm and the egg don't have any kind of physical faults with them, will the fetus definitely develop, or the child essentially be born, or is that definite, or is there another factor which is involved here? And then many of the scientists have replied that there's no pervasive. It's not necessarily true that if the egg and the sperm have no physical faults with them, that the child will still be born, or that the fetus will develop. And so, in this sense, from the Buddhist perspective, so then there must be a third condition that is involved in this process. And from the Buddhist perspective, we would say that the third condition is the engagement with the consciousness.
Sounds like Buddhists are winning. Just being too biased. I just kidding. Okay. So,
that thing is a bit. 죄송하다. 대구 친구기 최나로리아 파마심진 탐지 시시 단지 파마 탐지 네 미창으로 수술 파마 제용을 연애에 매년에 이나양 더 인지계야 디지와 저기 벌써 상처는 상당세지 positive sem을 디티지 당제샤 간제 상처는 상당제 당포만 탐지 그래서 우리 심진 탐지 아니 파마 진행 지에면도 다도 거든지 상나 간지 사고래 시시다 저거 지구식을 당버렸어 다도 상말로리아 그 뒤에 캄보디아는 이제 모르는 이제 아니 지금 유변조 생생이 뭐지고 토네 아니 거든 사고를 베스 아니 사고는 가지수 봐도 제야 되고 그랬어.
So from the Mahayana, the creative vehicle's perspective, then we say that all sentient beings have, all sentient beings have at some point been our acted as our mothers. But even if we took this, whether they had actually been our mothers or not our mothers, so if we just took it in a kind of just in a positive sense, thinking about this in a general positive sense, if we said that all sentient beings have been our mothers, then so then the question comes to how do we repay them? And what's the way in which we repay the sentient beings for their kindness for being our mothers? And then do we buy them a nice house? Do we buy them a big car? If we think of it in that way, what's the limit? How big a house or how big a car or how much stuff do you have to repay them with? So then it becomes a question of, okay, so you have to repay them, but how much do you have to repay them? If we're talking about just general things like houses and cars. And how long again?
디유다 좀 된디 다 대응 지게 더위도 막 랑게 아마리아 아니 다 쳐 사무 땡제 대양 아니 지게 코알라 주부를 받다 도베를 봐 아니 되네 간데서 도당 간데서 도고 유매 아니 코알리 겨울인지 간데서 내유매 아니 고백이 다 자와서 그래 아주마선 규다 소고디니 다센 친지도 머리를 원기 아니 중고지 소소 말 모두 나지 다 디기 도에 년부터라 다 다음에도 시작이네 라도 됐지 동의도 시작이네 어도도 상황이 지금 주어졌어 아니 되네 주어진 걸 때는 아니 마기 다냐면 제가 정말 땡제 최대 땡제네 다 좀내지 다랑 뒤에 손에 다 답을 남들 얘기 때문에 다 소소 지주를 맞도 디 지가서 그래 소소 양념 맞춰서 좀 된지 있다
친구들 지나시 도시만 다가게 리필이 오는데스 어디 저장을 저저 말이야 도시제니 남상도 뒤때문에 때네 아니다 배진 막 코알이 깨보고 코알 코로 먹어지 배진 딱 준비되게 남들 되나 그래서
So that's so you know how far and how long how much and how long do you have to repay them if we're thinking in just those in sort of worldly terms. So today is the day in which we celebrate the Buddha repaying his kindness to his mother. But how did he do that? The way in which he repaid the kindness to his mother was to teach her. And what did he teach her about? He taught her about the way in which we kind of get involved in samsara, and also the way in which we might be able to get ourselves out of samsara. So he taught her what is so on the basis of how to escape from the samsaric condition. He taught his mother about the root of the samsaric condition, so that on the basis of a kind of deep-rooted ignorance about the way things are, we are caught in samsara, and therefore this kind of mistaken on the basis of the ignorance, we develop mistaken mind about the way things exist, and therefore the Buddha taught his mother the antidote to that, which is the wisdom of emptiness, so that's the way to repay the kindness that's the best way to repay the kindness, thinking from a Mahayana perspective. So the Buddha taught the path, but he also said, he taught the path to find our way out of samsara, but he also said that it's up to you. I've taught you the path, it's up to you to follow the path or not. I can't help you I can't help you to escape from samsara by just giving you blessings. You need to walk the path yourself. And so this is the best way to repay the kindness. The best way would be to explain the positive paths of life to our parents. That would be the best way to repay the kindness.
that tengi diji jeru yo parji da ajuma sone kodin chimbu yuba ha ko ne kodin sama to be ki da jigi senambo ya samdu duba sabe ya lemma juye so da ram jinzin jikchag yo sre benen sanata susu ne enga susu ta ji jigdi ga ya 아니 밤에 내다나 조지 다시 상담 거체 다 미지 용지 아니 랑진의 수고다 인단티 미지 용지 그런 밤에 이제 양다로 드리도 그 밤을 그네 마다 빼려서 지제 라가비야 정신 sem나도야 미쪽에 말 밤을 때문에 sem나 뭐지 경쟁 레이제 네 밤을 샤도르도 용 시리즈 이 용량이 그냥 조금 저때 소소 경쟁의 체제. 좋아. 근데 지금도 세제 민제 차나 안디마레 세제 디셈나데 다 지금 또 랑 거진 시부 상담 같이 파마 주시 비지 거진 심부려야 일단만 껴면 왜매가 그런 줄 껴면 고연시지 문에 단다 지금 내나야 어디에 차야 돼 군수비 빼면은 말이야 버려. 일단 뒤 준비 겨워 봐도 다 지금 말이야. 야만이 딱 아마 가져지 이제 대수 참고로 내가 다 지금 지냐데 딱 가져 거리만 되는 한 가서 인지게 하면서 ungrateful person 차고 이제 일래서는 랑 진진가 땡땡 아주 맞아 누구를 쭉 두서 봐. 이마도 지금 소소 다다 여지 아니 파마르지다 땡모고지 가고 아니 소소소에 다다 줬더라도 아니 파마르다 아니 지 단어주나 보리네 맞아요 선물이 봤어 저한테 좀아 저랑 진진신 self-cherishing 되게 답변이 슈디 service.
So there's a sort of one thing that I've forgotten to say. If we may come to the understanding that we may come to have gratitude towards our parents for what we've done, but somehow there may be a gap where we don't really repay the kindness of them. We understand the need for it, but we don't actually do it. And what comes in here is a kind of is the self-cherishing mind. So we may think the self-cherishing mind can be what prevents us from actually, even if we've understood the need for the kindness, but we don't know how, we don't wish to repay it. Is self-cherishing mind, which is thinking, primarily from our side, primarily about ourselves. So we may feel a kind of ungrateful mind. So we may feel that, yes, my parents, did some things for me, but they didn't really do them so well, and they didn't really take very good care of me. This kind of thinking may come in and prevent us from repaying the kindness. And from
제가 두죠 단대기 파마도 배상에 녀마기 파마도 다가는 제가에도 예 그런 좀 참여해 그런 상식만 좀 뒤마로 왔어.
So then we have to, so this comes up in relation to our current parents, and also, but then this is thinking from a kind of self-absorbed or self-cherishing kind of perspective, and if we can understand that that's thinking from a self-cherishing perspective and not thinking clearly about our parents, then also this kind of way of reasoning can also be, we take it in relation to our current parents, but this then also can be expanded towards those, if we understand that all sentient beings have been our mothers, and therefore in terms of everyone else as well, we also have there's also a sense of gratitude, and therefore we should feel that it's not okay to allow this self-cherishing mind to feel that we don't need to repay the kindness to all of the sentient beings. So, there are, in general, we're talking here about those people who are our fathers and our mothers, for instance, in this life. Now, there are instances in all societies where the mothers or so what we're generally thinking about is those who have been of most benefit to us. That's the way that this way of mental development works. And So there are cases throughout all societies, whether it's Western societies or Tibetan society, where the parents were not able to take care of the children in a kind of proper way, or even where the parents came under the influence of strong negative emotions, and they even harmed the children. So we wouldn't take those cases. And when we're trying to develop our mind in this way, we wouldn't take those cases. This is a general idea, and the way to do it is to take it into relation to those who have been of the greatest benefit, or those we feel the greatest gratitude towards. So these individual cases, it's better not to think about those in that if that is the situation.
Today, the Jumdendiki, Anjuta Nambuji Vishani, Jumdendiki, Semjini Cutting, Sokan, that Tilet Hakaji Hazuta, Yomaris, the Indus and the Tati, Zogodi, Azumason, nearly Susu Yaman Bejani, Susu Yamoto, Sun Gavia, and Zao Kari Denny Moto. Indeed, Yamoto Sun the Zod, Danzin Denny. And Danzin passed some of time to the Lord Chubaji. Dindri Lord Chubaji Denche, Ani, Andrita, Chigi Yamoto Sun, who is something how could do that? That, indeed, the good Lord Chinji Lord Tigi, Dosho, that Lord Yantava, the Dosho Takarans, Komjache, the Mabsue, Jumati, Lambatena, that the name public membership will do.
So in terms of so in terms of the way of thinking about
that Jumdenti, that and telling him the Tibetan Charina, Jumdenti Mark Goodin Satante, so the Churden. About Tamjin, my Goodin Satan machine, around to Churaji, I mentioned in Chigi, and that. Jigi Simjan Tamji put in sub Tuna, and nearly a social new motto from the Kadesky to some down. This summer town she that in your motto from Tatarandi, Singrova, this summer thing she that did Yaman Guriki, and there was a language of Tamaimba. It didn't do your say, broom shapes of the language, Susu, no one porche, that the village no one did Debetone, and Simjan Digital in a home body. Dil Lam Dil on a review of Mary, but so your motto from moments in Batoni, Takajan Dil Jabu, she did that, Sinjin, Tanya from the Sinjin Digital in near 20, said it at 20. Dearest.
So the way that the Buddha has taught the most effective way for us to be to repay the kindness and be a benefit to sentient beings is to explain explain the kind of way in which our negative emotions and our negative qualities arise. And so negative emotions arise from what we call arise from grasping in the true existence of ourselves, and this under the sway of this misunderstanding, mistaken mind, which misunderstands the nature of reality, our negative emotions arise. This mistaken mind has a kind of antidote, an opposite counteractive force, which so it's a mistaken mind. It's a mistaken mind not based in reality, and there is a kind of counteractive positive, or kind of a counteractive kind of understanding based in reality, which acts as an antidote towards it. And this brings us into the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha said this from the Buddhist perspective, the Four Noble Truths. So the way to help others is, first of all, we have to understand this process in ourselves. We have to get our own experience of the way in which the self-grasping leads to negative emotions, and we have to understand that there is a counteractive force to that, and we have to develop this first of all within ourselves. So it's not like a story or it's like we say in Tibetan, and he's like, oh, it's said like this, or it's like it's said in the text like this. We actually have to develop our own true experience of these things, and then once we actually have self-experience of the way that that takes place, then we are able to. So we should wish that we should make a wish that we would teach the path to anyone that we come into contact with, that we could develop the understanding, our own understanding of the way this happens, and then to be able, once we've developed our understanding, to be able to teach that path to others, and we kind of recognize this as the best way that we can. This is the best way for us in terms of the Buddha's teachings to help to repay the kindness of others.
This same chinchigo gi docho di same yang taba dame de liya bezu cheche jomden de ge lotu ta kawa che na che kule shu ji kyen che na ya de zeba tiris ani lama keja na bota manguji yo re tena jalo ya ta jeru ji na ni yo re an tene che de na di chombe ta chu saja ke ni mo di lo yo zo zo lama yo zo zo kule kyen sa ti tan tinga cha de was 제상가다 담에도 쉐르 신이 저 하란주다 뭐 추거디 추당 비냐냐 문제지 투 엔 되게 문제디 준비 쉬고라 다 로모추 그래서 로 추베를 신지 되게 초서 나와 아니 로양다 담에도 쉐르 되려야다 로디 때문에 저도 신의 그야 타동 그야 안생 때문에 수야지 다지네 가지고 나고 산지 쉬운데 다지 거기 주세 배정 없이 차야 돼. 단조 땅아주야. 남상을 뒤때문에 제도 다 저기 땅에 자가리 개발 용도 꾸려 줘서다. 아주 디가 그랬어.
And so in terms of the most in terms of the kind of best mind of in terms of the Buddhist teachings, we would say that the best kind of mind is the mind wishing to attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings, or bodhicitta.
대외로 상계세도 명모 독숨래 계획세도 봐. 다디 계획이 계단이 걸었으나 로 추가 저거 친지로 뭐리고 딜레 계획이나 계획세도 봐. 오 다디
So yeah, then we talk about the mind of enlightenment. So in Tibetan, the word for enlightenment is changchup, and so or Sangye, and the Sangye or Janchup, they have the sense of going beyond the of being free from the three poisons. So attachment, hatred, and ignorance. So or on all of the negative emotions. So the state of enlightenment is to have become completely free from those negative emotions. And so we talk about so what is the essential point that all of that's talked about in the Kangya and the Tenga, which are the direct words of the Buddha, and then the translated words of the Indian masters? What is the main point or focus of all of the different Indian masters, and then also the Tibetan masters, including the four different traditions such as Lama Tsongkhapa and the Kagyu Sakya Nyingma, all of these traditions? What is the place where they, when thinking about how to attain enlightenment and how to remove all of these negative emotions, what is the main place or the main point that they focus on? And this comes down to the most important point is to the historical Buddha himself in where he underwent 6 years of very hard ascetic practices and training. So what is the main point of the training of the Buddha in those years and all of the lineage masters? It comes down to the point that understanding that the mind which grasps at things as having true existence is a mistaken mind, and that the way to understand that it is a mistaken mind is to meditate on the lack of inherent existence or emptiness, and this is to understand that in order to be free of the negative emotions, that the source of that is the grasping at true existence, and therefore that is the point that all of these masters, when we're talking about attaining enlightenment for all sentient beings, that is the point that the masters have all come down to.
아니 미리야 강토도 팬도시 채워 삼지 삼로 대대비나 더 디센니디 마도리케 초조르스타 대비오스티 단자로 모습 엔디네디 예게 땅에 탑들이야 아니 산지 입장이 네 산지 나버산지 좋아네 네베자도 추주 샤버 전에 네베자도 또 시지다 미지 야부지도 예라스 셴티메 유술의 비네 간이 센데메보다 간이 된데메 지금 동해 된데메 찍어래데 이내야 로 트리비 원기 소소 간이세 타피체 용 조조 간이 용야 유리야 로데 지 차데 왔어 그러면서 그래 직다 당내 전에다 지 방구 시비지가 미기 수를 간이데 간이 체도니 간이서 말해줘 다 지금 소소기부 용야다 미셔버다 상마담비기다 배원기 또 남시 유도를 소월 다 되는 거는 조조의 차리 거야. 이 뉴스는 다 강다르장 알아주다 지기 개워치마 연애를 상기의 연애를 매내를 개치셔도 다 셈로 추배원 그렇지 스님이 셈에 집다고 때문에 내대야지 때 정말 너무 당지 충분하게 이 다주셔 지금 상고 서비스.
And so the what is the best prayer that we can make is to not so on a simple level, the best prayer that we can make is for us to to not fall into mistaken ways of understanding or thinking. So, not falling into mistaken ways of understanding or thinking, and then always trying to be of benefit to others. So this is a kind of, in a general sense. And then on top of that, the Buddhist tradition, and then all of the different traditions within the Buddhist tradition will add various things which are important to do. But from a basic level, in terms of a way to live a good way of life, we should make the prayer that we never fall into mistaken ways of understanding things, and we should always try to be of benefit to others. And in terms of not falling into mistaken ways of understanding, all sentient beings wish to have happiness, and they don't wish to suffer. But through mistaken ways of understanding, the problems, most of the problems that arise in the world, we can, people causing each other suffering or causing themselves and others suffering, despite having the wish to have happiness and not have to suffering, through mistaken minds, the problems of the world arise. So whether there's past or future lives or not, or whether there is enlightenment or not, if we're able to kind of follow these two ways of thinking, not to be follow mistaken minds and to wish for others, then that is a very good general basis on which a way to live our life.
So it's almost 2:30. So we have to leave some time for question and answer. So before that, maybe so now, as I told you, I try my best to introduce you the essence teachings of Buddha. It's not perfect the way I described it. It's not a perfect way because I'm not a perfect teacher. But this is I think the most important and the practice if you are wondering why in a Tibetan community or Tibetan Buddhism they talk so much about bodhicitta and then the ignorance mind. So this is, I try to make a link towards that. Now as a tip, I'm not a great practitioner. I can call myself a practitioner for sure, not a great practitioner. If you put a percentage, I'm just like 20%. So, but nothing better than nothing. So give you a tip. So when we talk about negative, destructive emotions, we have to be very aware of destructive emotions, about anger, hatred, jealousy, and so on, because we felt like we need it. We need that. Why I'm saying this is people. One of my friends, actually recently, a very good friend of mine. She's a girl. Oh goodness, what I just a friend. So she said she had a complaint about her boyfriend, and said, Rinpoche, my boyfriend is so boring. I said, what? And then she said, well, I told that I talked with my ex-boyfriend. He said, okay, no problem, you can talk, no problem. He said something like that. But for Wish, she wants like little jealousy, right? So it's like it's needed in your life. So that's what she's thinking. And similarly, if someone says so much bad about you and your family, immediately the response should be like, how dare you consider, just like strong fight. If there's no strong fight, your family feel like not really protected. Protected. So, I don't need to explain that while you having a jealousy and so much narrow-minded, distorted emotions bring so much unhappiness. That you all know it. We are fully experienced on this level. But Buddha, when he taught about how to become fully enlightened, he taught about 5 paths. Path of accumulation, a path of preparation, and then path of seeing, and then path of meditation. Right? Go on.
Yes.
Right? So, all these 4 are a little bit hard to achieve. But he said the most time that to become a Buddha, we have to put lots of effort while we are on the fourth level, 4th path. Because here we talk about overcoming the imprints of the negative distorted emotions. So there are so much effort. If we are saying it's like taking out when there's a garlic, and then you use a kind of like a wooden thing to crush it in, then you take out the garlic out of it, but still for days and days and days the smell is there. So the thing is not there, but still the strong sting is there. So similarly, whatever we do negative things, it really leaves a strong imprint. That Buddha said we should, if we want to fear about negative thoughts or distorted emotions, we should always think about the stain it will leave within us. So it's not like it comes up and goes away. It's more like a bad mosquito. It takes the blood and what do we call it? Put a virus in. Virus in. So be careful with that. So that's a small tip for you. So thank you very much. And I have my friends here, so they know if I open my mouth, I can go kind of endlessly. So here I stop here today, and then if you have questions, you can do that. Before the question and answer, I really thank Tushita for calling me. Even you people don't know what kind of a connection I have with Tushita. I gave my first teaching in my life in Tushita. There's one Gomba somewhere, right? I cannot remember that. Age of this one? This was one, right? Okay. So I was like 12 or 13 years old. That time I just gave a transmission, a Guru Puja transmission. So the Lama Yeshe's brother is there, Geshe Tsering. I remember. I recited because too much nervous. I have a book in my hand and I cannot see the lines. That's my first place. And then Lama Yeshe and Lama Yeshe, very close friends of my past life. And due to Rinpoche's kindness, and then some of my friends, so we are very good friends. So that's why I'm here. And so I thank you very much, Tushita, once again. And most important, I thank all of you. So people who spend a time out of your busy life and come here to Tushita to get a peace of mind. Whether, I don't know, you have found the peace of mind or not, that's up to you, but you all look very happy. I'm very happy. That's a good sign. And I wish you the best in your life, and then as we have accumulated such a wonderful karma on this beautiful occasion, a precious time, so we should do a dedication that whatever we have put in effort, whatever the effort we have put in, may this brings peace in the world. That's what we really kind of need, especially Hong Kong are going through such a big problem, and then not only that, and Australia on fire. Please remember that. There's one Australian here. And then I don't know anything. I don't have any news about Amazon. Maybe I don't know if it's happening or not. But please pray, may this kind of tragedy never comes. But only praying won't bring peace. But please feel to move on. To whenever this kind of problem comes up, you can contribute something into this. So, and then also with this merit, may the wonderful guide, His Holiness Dalai Lama, and other great leaders in this world evolve along and guide us, and then we also have an effort to listen to them and change ourselves. So, thank you very much. Okay, question answer.
Would you equate arrogance with not correct understanding when you talk of prayer?
Arrogance,
willful arrogance. Willful arrogance.
What do you say? Mistaken.
Yes.
Mistaken mind.
Yes.
진지로비 러던스.
진지로
나게 찬양을 왜 가리나. 다오르스레스. 집으로 오시고.
마제세데 다다는 그런 그래서 arrogance.
Arrogance, isn't it?
Arrogance.
그래서 하고 있던
맞아, 마제세데가.
나게 하고 있던 나게 그 willful에 이게 소속이 하고 있는. So something like it's 이게 구수서 하고 있는. 아니 양기 나게 신이스. 디도 진지로
다디 시류 친지로 캡처해봐. 단단 마지 제고에 nen가디 아니 수수디 야닝야 디디요 스타네 사마트리스. 수수를 강에 이거디 야닝야 디디요메디 뭐 니즈를 열어서나 디코 타체 투요 말데 그냥 이제 드디어스 요레스 대연은 미신거 니버지 대체 인게지 제부시 저랑 상담한다 대수 뭐지 지지시 레스 해직된 데도 왔어 지도 저 친지도 지기 레스 이 용당이 아주 무슨 포스 쟁이 좀 봐. 오, 디 포스 쟁이 다 머리 봤어야 돼. 진짜 친지도 유비 뭐든지 주마지 마신 거. 마신 거 될 때네 아니 아주 무슨 샘디 never mind to chat. 샘디 마다 그 부스도 없어 봐. 어디 디차니 아주 무슨 마켓 차도 단계에서 상어디 연구를 했어. 그러다 통해 머리 봤어야 돼. 통하라고 해. 잘 봐.
So in terms of the kind of what is called willful ignorance and mistaken mind, so we would say that the mistaken willful ignorance is a form of mistaken mind. So it's more so it's a subset of mistaken mind. So there are many kinds of mistaken mind. How does So it's just a subset of that. It's one small part of it. And mistaken minds are a much bigger. There's many more different kinds of them. So they the mistaken minds come about through misunderstanding the actual nature of something. So even if it was in terms of pride, it would be actually to misunderstand the nature of our own kind of status, about what, how important we are or not important we are. Mistaken minds come about through not understanding the way the things correctly exist, and this is something that we have to sort of train ourselves to understand. So all mistaken minds are based on a misunderstanding, and then the biggest misunderstandings, the biggest misunderstanding of all is the misunderstanding of the kind of nature of self and the nature of reality, and we call that beginningless ignorance. So that's the root of all the other kinds of mistaken minds stem out of this main root, which we call beginningless ignorance. And from that beginning, it's ignorance come all of the others. So we have to understand they come from not understanding, and we have to develop understanding that they are mistaken minds. These mistaken minds cause us to be narrow-minded, and kind of cause us to be narrow-minded and shut down. And so we need to understand they're all based on a kind of misunderstanding of the nature of reality, but stemming back to beginningless ignorance.
제가 아주 대대 영화 중이기 당고대가 통화 말이 봤으니까 당고 말이 봤으니까 이제 당고세디 중이는 당고 입잖아요. 당고스라비아. 토마스의 준비 곧 조치죠. 용조 답변은 지금 이거 지수번은 지시거든요. 정말 용의 이게 당시 규제 조치니 모치치니. 대인도 잡고 토마스에 다 조세디 레저기 시그널에 통화를 세디 조가 고고요 여러 가지 인터넷이
So I've heard it said that we talk about in the Buddhist tradition we talk about the 12 links of dependent origination, and the first link in the 12 links of dependent origination is the first link is beginningless ignorance. So we talk about that. The first link is ignorance. We talk about that ignorance in two ways. One, we talk about it as being the first link, and from the sense of being beginningless, that's it is the main kind of the main cause, which then causes all of the other links of conditioning, karmic conditioning, consciousness, etc. All of the other 12 links come out of that initial. So we use two words for it. First, it is the primary cause, and also it's the main cause, which then taught all of the 12 links of dependent reiteration, and it's the way in which we are continually reborn in samsara.
It's also, I call it mastermind. This is the bad boss. The final competition is that with that one. Okay. So, oh yeah. Oh, okay.
First, thank you. I'm a little confused still about your point regarding how to repay gratitude to human parents, biological parents, who, for whatever reason, were unable to take care of or have harmed their children. And I'm hoping you could elaborate on that point a little bit. If you could, please.
Tushita. Ale, comment sur le level. That the direct samadhana kumara, that we cannot directly see the kindness there, because we are the victims of our parents like you know, the parent. This is like but as I said it before, in a general idea, mother, if you watch Discovery Channel, it's wonderful. Like how the mother really, they are not educated. They never taught you have compassion. You have to show love to your child. So innocent. How they sacrifice their life. Once the predator comes, they sacrifice their own life to save their calf or can you see child? I don't know. Offspring. Yeah. But then it's also in a species like animals, also in a human, but sometimes parents can be bit because of harmful to their children. So that's why I said if we just look at that perspective only, then we cannot see the positive side. But now, if we only just take the part where you stayed in the mother's womb, and then you were born. But during up to that time, once you're born, you're given education, until the harm was done. Actually, she tried to save you. She has given you a love. That we have to accept that. So you can take this part and say, my mother is grateful. Up to here. Maybe just to bring one good, what's the teaching of that? Ruler? Teaching. Scale. When you make a line, draw a line.
It's a ruler.
Roller. Just buy a big roller and then you put it there. So up to there, you can say yes. Up to that, my father has been very good. Until I'm 6-7 years old, no problem. Then it causes a problem. So then, if you are a good practitioner, then you can say, maybe this, due to this deluded mind, with this ignorance mind, with this strong corrupted mind of my father or mother. So then it will haunt me. So then you can say also, my parents harm me. That's for you, sure you can say that. But up to that, you can say they've been very kind. And still it is not comfortable for you to bring this kind in your meditation to generate compassion. Then you can bring some like best friends, like whom you can cry with lots of sufferings, then you can put your head on his or her shoulder and then share all these problems with. So also think of their kindness. So it's just not, as I already told you, it's not only about parents. The main thing is about the kindness, the great kindness. Is it clear? Yeah. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I work with children, and often also parents come to me with their complaints about their children. They do not seem to see the good qualities in their children, whereas I see them in the classroom. And it's always kind of a struggle for me, because when we talk about repaying the gratitude of our parents, we're always thinking of those who are older than we are. But if we follow the logic of all beings being our parents, then the children are also our parents.
Yes.
Or will be my parents, right? So how do we work with that? How do we also bring about that change in parents and in us as adults, that not only we're looking at parents, but also starting to plant those seeds by way of respecting or acknowledging the inherent wisdom of the children. And how, I think, one example, when my son was little, he's 9 years old and I'm washing dishes. We were living at an FPMT center in California. And he comes from behind and he hugs me and he says, "Mom, thanks for creating me." And I said, "You're welcome. Thank you. Your father too, he helped a little." And so we had already discussed how children come about. And so he sits down and I had served him rice and beans and lettuce. And he pierces one bean with his fork and he says, he's looking at the bean and he says, "Well, Mom, in fact, everybody helped create me." And I said, "How is that?" And he said, "Well, think about it. Look at this bean. No universe, no bean. No universe, no baby," he says. And he starts eating his food, and I'm like, wow, that's right. And so that's one example of so many episodes that happen with one child. And I see these in the children I teach. If they're given the space, that inherent wisdom flows forth. But as parents, how do we also look at our children as our kind mothers? And would that be beneficial without creating a culture of child worship or permissiveness or anything like that? Because I know things get out of control. But how would that be beneficial? And if yes, what are some practical ways to start doing things like that at home, in school, to maybe bring a little change about?
Well, you have all this information. So I know you have all the methods with you. That's great. We have to clap for that. And now we all know that. You know that. So never give up. That's the most important. So never, we have when I was very young, I loved to read comics, and especially Tintin. You like Tintin?
I have a Tintin shirt. I'm so obsessed with it.
Me too. So in the Tintin comic, the people who don't know Tintin, so in the comic book, they have this very kind-hearted supporter of Tintin called Captain Haddock. So he is very kind person who really takes care of Tenzin, but so many times he faces so many problems. And then sometimes he faces so many difficult situations. So in the comic, they are very brilliant. They cannot say, now he's going through a problem. Then the children won't get the idea. So they put like a red devil looking captain and a white angel looking captain. So saying, you should do that. And then one saying, you shouldn't do that. So it's like white and red thing talking to each other. So similarly, I think you should also practice Tintin's comic. Just kidding. You should practice on, because it's really a good quality that you have within you, and it is very easy to lose. It's like a, because for Chinese, the cha-cho-cho, map cha-cho-cho, and map cha-cho-cho. Easy to break,
Easy to destroy.
easy to destroy. So now,
Easy to lose.
so to make this much more stronger, you have to always admire yourself that you have this quality. You have seen this quality in your children, and you have seen this in this beautiful environment for children. So, and as now you have spoken in this room, people got to know the qualities of children. Before here, I'm just trying to talk about the Buddha nature, but you have taken something, my position. Just kidding. In people love this. I just sit here because formality. But now you have just seated a kind of a beautiful plan in every people that we can learn from children. That's great. Thank you. So put more awareness, and then also to use all the methods to strengthen your this thought of yours. And then I have nothing special to say. Okay. So one more, and then I think we're done for today. Okay.
Rinpoche, I think when a lot of people, when they hear about repaying the kindness of others in the context of Buddhism, they feel like they're not doing much. They don't engage much in activities.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the thought, I need to do more, you know? And usually that manifests outwardly in helping others without first cultivating stability within oneself. So what would you say would be the balance between helping others and also maintaining a personal practice and being able to, because again, at least within Buddhism, the goal is higher, to bring us into a level where we can help everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's because we're, personally speaking, I'll make it very personal now, I'm a very narrow-minded human being, and I see only this life.
I'm with you.
And I can even really help my mother of this life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What to say about my countless other mother sentient beings.
Mm-hmm.
So, but sometimes I've been away from home a long time now, and when my mom speaks to me, she tells me, I miss you, I want you to come home. And inside of me, I try to think, I'm here trying to work on myself, so that one day I can be of benefit to you as well. So I don't know if that's an awareness that can be cultivated in other ways, but how to gain balance in there. At the same time, I sometimes feel I'm not doing much for her. So
You live in Tushita.
yeah.
And if you say this, that's really bad. Just the most important here, as Lama Yeshe said, in order to benefit others, you have to be changed in a very positive way, and not just only hearing beautiful things will change you. Hearing and then to somewhat contemplating, and then go to put that in habit. Right? Going to cultivate the habit. So those are the stages. So whatever kind of problem you are going through, especially in a Tushita, as a society, so many problems are here. But if you are always wondering how to overcome the problem that I have right now, somebody made me very unhappy, so how to overcome that? So you do the kind of research and listen to some talks of the teachers, and then whatever it makes sense to you, what you feel like this is the most beneficial thing that I have heard so far. So try to hold it, and to contemplate it, and then bring into kind of your habit. So your mom says, "Come back, I miss you." You can say, "Hey mom, just wait, I'm just collecting some gifts for you." So then, for maybe a year or two, you go back and hug her, and you have something regrets, just open it, right? Ask for her forgiveness and tell how much she means to you. And now, the most important. So if she might have so much complaints and problems to speed out. So now you have to show your skill. Now, I have a problem with this person, that person. Now I don't have this problem with that person. The most important thing is something that I have wrong in my mind. So somehow I changed it. So now, if you can give this kind of tip to your mother, you don't need to say, "Buddha said that." Don't make it religious. Just give the essence of the teaching. You are not there to convert your mother. Don't ever do that. So just give her the strength. And she has the strength in her. So now you have to let her recognize that. You can do the same. I have done that. So you can see, take advantage of being a son. I have this genetic of you. So I believe in my
Good genetics.
that you can do it too. So here we go. Very happy family. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have to balance. Lama Yeshe nam ka le cho chu ye pa lo sa te pe ra me sa su gi dro me sa ta tu ne yu chi ra guru dana mandala kam ya ta ya